let's look at a little bit more in detail about why the dragonfly is associated with truth and seeing discernment, truth and discernment, which is what I was talking about in part two, and just what I feel is just so important at the moment on all the levels, like of seeing and perceiving and knowing how to shift our perception so that we can, maybe see a situation in a different way or see the truth in it behind the glamour that's being presented. So, dragonflies have compound eyes, which are many angled seeing. They have, if you watch one of the videos, they almost look like, those flowers that have a center with all the different, like hundreds of little dots. They kind of look like that. Um, And each one of those little slots in the eye is like I don't know if it's hexagonal, but that's what it looks like. And it's like got they're multifaceted, and it helps them to have the ability to perceive layers, right? Um, and of course, they have this almost 360 vision. Can you imagine being able to look at a situation through multiple layers? And that's the shamanic, footnote or invitation or interpretation, I should say, to notice the weave of illusion, because they literally see all the facets of a single scene. If they were a human, if we had that facility, if that was a superpower that we suddenly put on a helmet and that's how we could operate. You could see all the layers of truth and deception and everything in between in a room full of people. It's an empath's nightmare, but anyway, that's the thinking behind, why dragonflies have long since been associated with discernment. Um, their their agility, their multi-directional flight allows them to, in the metaphor that we're tracking, move through different frames, because their flight is very sudden, it's precise, it's not linear. It's very much like this, if you watch them, they're very swirly and, a little bit like hummingbirds, but not. Um, they do not travel in straight lines, though. They pivot, they swirl, they hover, they reverse. They catch their prey mid-air, and that can help us to, pivot, to learn how to pivot, shift perspective at a moment's notice, quickly. Ability to break, fixed frames of interpretation, right? We all have these fixed ideas about things, and as information is coming into our lives so quickly and also being disseminated so quickly, um, and the letting go invitation is so strong right now. This medicine can really help us break these kind of places where we fixate on an interpretation of something that may or may not be true. It may be complete illusion. It often is. So their agility can also help us break through illusion. Their life between water and air makes them threshold beings, similarly to frog spirit. I don't know about newts, but certainly frog spirit, also metamorphic in their life cycle. um, change from one thing to another. So dragonflies spend, as we know, their young juvenile stage as nymphs under the water, then hatch into these incredible flying machines. Um, so the shamanic principle behind that is it makes them really good guides for times of threshold, which is what we're in. We're in the huge uh, threshold at the moment. We're in the liminal space between what is breaking down and what is forming. That's where we are in our history as human beings. So they're really helpful for dissolving um, ordinary consensus reality and feeling and sensing the whispers of the new, a little bit like the imaginal cells of the butterfly. So they can be guides during times of personal threshold, when you're in between stages of life, and collective threshold times, which is now. Their um, iridescence, their wings are iridescent. Yes, they're incredible when you look at them. So I'm in love with these creatures. And that their medicine there is revealing hidden spectrum. Uh, they refract their wings and their bodies refract light and color shift, and there's this beautiful shimmering that if the sun catches them in a certain way, they'll light up or they'll sort of almost disappear. So it is a medicine of how appearance changes with viewpoint, right? What looks true from one angle might look completely different from another. So they teach the eye to notice um, what you might call spectral truth, the full spectrum of truth, rather than just the surface story, right? Which, when we're moving really fast through life, we don't have time to just pause and go, what's really going on here? What's beneath the surface here that might need my attention? Um, and then, of course, their predatory exactness, which equals um, discernment, help us hone that, not just discernment, but, when I was speaking before that we have these 30 to 60 seconds to know in our bodies if something's right or not for us, and then take action, right? Discern, act. Because if we hover, well, you can pause in that discernment too and witness, but the predatory nature of the dragonfly is about discernment and then action. Um, Discerning also what truly feeds us, right? What is the real food for us? What is the real nourishment for us in life, rather than what distracts us, what numbs us out? Um, so what is real rather than seductive falsehood, or illusion or glamours? Those glamours. We have to watch out for those. Um, they can teach, nature intelligence, ecological intelligence, because they require very clean water for the larvae to hatch. Dragonflies thrive only where water is healthy. So that's an interesting uh, point to think about too. They could tell you, if you're out in the wilderness and you want to know where a good water source is, if you don't have a great filter, you can look for dragonflies. But they are they're an indicator of what is healthy. So If you are in a situation where you sense something might be toxic, if you choose to work with Dragonfly over a period of time, which you might after you make relationship, you can ask your Dragonfly ally, is this situation healthy or toxic? And ask it in the journey if you're curious about that for a sign, like what would be a sign in your body? What would be a sign? Like if you closed your eyes and you pictured your dragonfly, what what would be a sign from it to let you know that? That would be useful to as an inquiry. Because I think that's really important, especially now. Something can look really great in the supermarket, but maybe it's a lettuce that's been vaccinated and you don't want to eat it because you don't want to eat what's in the vaccine. Um, they're actually doing that in Riverside County, experimenting with that. So, just something simple like a kind of nugget of all of that that we've just looked at. Dragonfly can teach us how to shift the lens, to catch how light and angle change what we call real. When the field is confused, which it sure is at the moment, with so much contrary information and some of it deliberately angled to make us fearful or confused. The dragonfly wings will say, look at the same thing from another face, from another point of view, as well as their eyes, right? We just look through dragonfly eyes, like, and understand, wow, there are so many truths here. What is my truth? How do I and come back into your own core when you're looking out at so many different aspects of truth? So it's a lot of wisdom, right? That they carry. There's a lot there that they can help us with. Um, especially this ability to see, feel, sense that most things are alive to more than one truth. What matters more than an intellectual analysis of what truth is right, which for me, I can never get to the core if I try to figure it out in my head. What matters more, I think, is which truth resonates with our own core truth, our own inner core essence. And from that place, we know. Um, and if we can cultivate this dragonfly way of seeing things with different lens perspectives, it can help us create necessary empathy bridges with people that have very different points of view to us. And that's an important skill as well at the moment.